Welcome to the press conference following the Foreign Affairs Council of this afternoon. Apologies for the delay. Without further delay, I will give the floor to HRVP Borel, who will be briefing you about the outcome of the meeting of today, and who will be taking also your questions. HRVP Borel, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Today, it's 5 years from the tragic events that took place in Brussels. We pay tribute to the victims of these events, stressing that terrorism and extremism have no place in our societies. We have had a long and intense Foreign Affairs Council, in which we took an important decision to promote and protect human rights around the world. 2 weeks after we adopted sanctions linked to the Navalny case, we have taken decisive actions against responsible for serious human rights violations and abuses in 6 countries. The sanctions that the Council adopted today concern 11 individuals and 4 entities from China, North Korea, Libya, South Sudan, Eritrea, and Russia. It is appropriate that we took the decision on a day when we also had an important exchange with the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, and set up a strategic dialogue with her office. The package targets very serious human rights violations and abuses independently of the place where they are being committed. All European restrictive measures comply with international law and are subject to highest standard of the rule of law. As I said, this package includes 4 individuals and 1 entity from China, who have had an active role in the design and implementation of the Chinese policies in Xinjiang. We were made aware during the meeting that China has retaliated to those sanctions, and rather than change its policies and address our legitimate concerns, China has again turned a blind eye, and these measures are regrettable and unacceptable. There will be no change in the European Union determination to defend human rights and to respond to serious violations and abuses, as I said, irrespective of where they are committed. The China retaliatory sanctions affects, among others, members of the European Parliament, scholars and entities of the Political and Security Committee, the Subcommittee on Human Rights, as well as 2 national foundations, and this is something that we consider unacceptable. It doesn't answer our legitimate concerns. We want China to engage in a dialogue with the EU human rights, not to continue to be confrontational. This is about the sanctions and the answer from China. But the Council today had other important issues. Maybe the most important one, because it's going to be considered by the leaders at the next European Union Council, is Turkey. With ministers, we assessed the European Union-Turkey relations. In view of the joint report we prepared with the Commission for the members of the European Council next Thursday. This was broadly considered a good basis for the debate of heads of state and government, although ministers provided also additional assessment. As the report recognizes, since last December, we have seen some signals in the right direction from the Turkish leadership and steps towards de-escalation in the Eastern Mediterranean. Drilling and exploratory vessels were withdrawn from the Cyprus Exclusive Economic Zone. Rhetoric has toned down, and Turkish authorities have expressed their interest in a strong relationship with the EU. Still, the process of de-escalation in the Eastern Mediterranean remains fragile, and de-escalation efforts need to be sustained. At the same time, the domestic situation in Turkey remains of serious concern, including the threats to close one of the major opposition parties, the HDP, and the withdrawal of Turkey of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, better known as the Istanbul Convention. You will have seen the statements I issued on these matters, expressing our strong concern and condemnation, and also the fear that these kind of measures are taking Turkey out of the European path. We agreed with the ministers that it is important to continue encouraging positive development. At the same time, there were a broad agreement that it is important to keep all options on the table in case required. In order to continue preparing the European Union Council, this evening I will also meet with the Foreign Minister from Turkey, Mevlut Cavusoglu, with whom I will comment the report in order to inform the leaders during its meeting. The Council has not taken conclusion about the report on Turkey because certainly it is up to the European Union Council to adopt them. I updated ministers on the recent and upcoming activities on the Western Balkans, such as the Stabilization and Association Council and the recent visit of the European Union Special Representative Miroslav to the region. We are going to have a full discussion on Western Balkans on the upcoming Foreign Affairs Council. Let me stress that the Western Balkans have been and will continue to be a priority for the European Union. Other main point in the agenda was the southern neighborhood, a region that the pandemic has hit very hard, and we need to strengthen our relationship because business as usual is not an option. Young people are leaving, and we need to do better and more. We need a stronger, closer, and more effective partnership. The ministers welcome the communication on southern neighborhood, and from now on we will focus on invest and engage more with our southern partners. On Russia, we had a brief discussion in Russia. Ministers reconfirmed that the 5 guiding principles remain relevant, that the principles that have to drive our relationship with Russia, and that within those principles we will be pushing back, containing or constraining and engaging with Russia as the situation merits it. It's clear that Russia has taken a confrontational stance towards the European Union. The authorities' violation of human rights and international law, both on Russian territory and Chechnya, for example, as we have sanctioned today, as well as beyond its borders, are increasing. The Russian authorities have shown unwillingness to engage on addressing these issues. Russia is drifting towards an authoritarian state and away from Europe, and Europe must draw the consequences of that. The European Union leaders will continue the discussion on this important but difficult relationship later this week at the Council. A specific point was related to Georgia. We discussed Georgia following the intense mediation efforts by the European Union over the past week to overcome the political crisis in the country. I briefed the ministers about the European Union-Georgia Association Council that I chaired last Tuesday and about the European Union mediation efforts through the personal envoy designated by the European Union Council President Charles Michel. This work continues. And I want to reiterate the need for all leaders of Georgian political parties to put the interests of the Georgian people first, to make the necessary compromises, and to turn their attention to other urgent issues like coronavirus pandemic, economic recovery, and national security. On Myanmar, we took stock of the situation in the country, which sadly continues to deteriorate dramatically following the military coup. There are more than 250 people killed. 250 people killed by the army using armed wars against the demonstrators. We have imposed sanctions against 11 individuals responsible for the ongoing repression. Under the updated sanctions regime, we can also now sanctions on economic entities owned or controlled by the military, as well as those that generate revenues to them. This will be done soon. On Venezuela, we analyze the situation. After the European Union delegation to Venezuela was declared persona non grata, the stabilization and redemocratization of the country is possible, but it requires consistent efforts. We will engage on that, and we'll discuss also with the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, here in Brussels on Wednesday. The good news is the final agreement that we have been pushing for long between the government and the opposition in order to deblock the resources, the financial resources blocked in current accounts abroad in order to finance buying vaccines for the Venezuelan people. This is something very important, positive. We welcome this agreement. And finally, on Ethiopia. 5 months have passed since the beginning of the so-called law and order operation against the Tigray region. Since then, we have been receiving daily reports of human rights violations of massive scale, including massive rape, torture, and a complete blackout, lack of communication, lack of access to the humanitarian help to the people of Tigray. This is an unacceptable situation that pushes us to continue to put pressure for humanitarian access to be allowed, for independent investigation on human rights abuses to be launched, and for Eritrean troops to be withdrawn from Tigray. We are ready to activate all our foreign policy tools against those responsible for human rights violations. This applies to all parties in the conflict. I have mandated the Finnish Foreign Minister, Pekka Haavisto, to go back to the region on a second mission and express clearly our capacity to act if this situation continues. We want to have humanitarian access to the region, and we want an independent investigation on human rights abuses, and we want Eritrean troops to be withdrawn. There were other issues, not minor issues, because there are a lot of issues from Lebanon to other parts of the world that has been taken into consideration by the ministers today, but these are the most important ones. Thank you.
I'm Maria Sarab from Open TV Greece. I have 2 questions, if I may. On Turkey, you mentioned that the ministers had some additional assessment on your report. Could you elaborate more on that? And the second question, you said you discussed about the recent developments on the Istanbul Convention and the HDP party. And you said that these decisions put Turkey out of the European path. Could such decisions freeze the positive agenda towards Turkey? And what was the mood in the Council by the Ministers of Foreign Affairs? Thank you.
No, my reference to this decision, as well as the Istanbul Convention, as the decisions taken against a political party, as issues that has to be taken into consideration. When we say that there has been a positive development, drilling, water delimitation, the rhetoric. That's clear. It has been improvement on these sides. But at the same time, there are other issues like this one in which we cannot consider them as positive. And the mix will have to be taken into consideration by the Council. We'll have provide guidance about the positive and negative approaches. We want to have a relationship with Turkey as a candidate country, as a neighbor, as an important country with whom we want to have the best relations, defending the interests of the member states and the values of the Union. The ministers has been considering the report. I have to say that I am very happy and grateful to them because they have had a quite unanimous positive evaluation. Considering the report, a balanced one, but since this report is being addressed to the European Union Council and is going to meet in a couple of days from now, the Council has not taken conclusions, and it has been several considerations about some specific issues that I will transmit also to the European Union Council for their consideration. I cannot go into details now.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Athanasios.
Thanks very much, Athanasios, Star TV Greece, and the Cyprus News Agency. You mentioned that the leaders are going to adopt conclusions, but how are they going to do it? Because it's going to be a teleconference, as they told us. Is there another legal way to adopt the conclusions on Turkey? Secondly, from what you report, I understand that we all need more time to assess what's going on, and if the U-turn from Turkey is viable, how much time? Could you say up to June, after the negotiations for the Cyprus issue? And finally, that point, because you're going to meet Mevlut Çavuşoğlu tonight, are you going to discuss the Cyprus issue in the upcoming negotiations? And how are you going to persuade him to allow the European Union in the negotiating table, since Turkey clearly opposes that you sit on the same table, even as an observer, from what we hear at least? Thank you.
Yes, for sure. We are going to talk about Cyprus. How not? And in the following days and weeks, and maybe until the summer, we will have to continue following closely the behavior of Turkey, using some landmarks, some references, and the development of the talks about Cyprus settlement will be one of it. The negotiations or the preliminary talks between Greece and Turkey will be another one. The developments of the situation in Libya will be another one. And the development of the internal political situation in Turkey will be another one. We have to follow several indicators about the behavior of Turkey. As I said, until now it has been good and positive ones, and others which are not good nor positive. And we have to continue following closely the situation in order to be sure that Turkey also is in a positive mood and wants to engage seriously on the negotiations that we have to do for many different reasons. Among them, for example, the support for the Syrian refugees.
Thank you. And now, Ricard, you have the floor. Please present yourself and your media. Thanks.
Hello, Ricard Josviak, Radio Free Europe. Two questions as well, if I may. Firstly, on Russia, you said that you support the 5 principles which have been in place since 2016. Is there any one of those 5 principles you perhaps will put an extra accent on now? And on Georgia, if I may, as well, do you think it makes sense for Mr. Danielson to travel back to Georgia anytime soon? And if he does, do you think he should speak to perhaps other actors in Georgia, such as Bidzina Ivanishvili or perhaps even Mikhail Saakashvili? Thank you.
Yes, the 5 guiding principles continue being the 5 guiding principles. The framework for our relations with Turkey. and all of them are equally important. And in that there is a strong agreement about all member states, and certainly from my side. This is the framework to deal with Russia, and inside this framework, as I said, there are three types of actions depending on the Russian behavior: to push back, to constrain, and to engage. And all of these three verbs are contained inside the 5 guiding principles. But nothing has changed. Yes, the 5 guiding principles are from quite a lot of years ago, but the Minsk agreement continued without being implemented, and the need to increase our resilience, to reach out with Eastern countries, to continue reaching out with the Russian civil society and engaging with needed, continue being perfectly valid. I haven't said that Mr. Danielson is going to go back to Georgia. I said that the mediation efforts continue, but I haven't said specifically how. Maybe, maybe not. It's a personal representative of the President of the European Union Council. We'll see how we can be more effective. But I mean, this mediation effort has not been finished. It will continue. Because we need to continue supporting the process. We need to continue mediating, because Georgia cannot install in a bipolarization that prevents the government from working, and the country have the needed stability in order to face the important reforms that they have to do. So we continue supporting this mediation, and we call for all political parties in Georgia to take their responsibility in order to think on the interest of the Georgian people and have the political agreements needed in order to face the important challenges they have in front of them.
Thank you, Nabila. Thank you for the question. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. High Rep, 3 points on Venezuela, please. Is this diplomatic crisis with Venezuela affecting the cooperation and the humanitarian aid with the country? The second point is, do you think this crisis, this situation will be normalized before the elections at the end of this year? And third, do you know the points for your conversation with Mr. Blinken? Thank you.
Sobre Venezuela, for sure, no? About Venezuela, for sure, we are going to talk. With the previous American administration, there was no coordination in our approach toward Venezuela. We were in a completely different approach, and they were not a way of working together. With this new administration, I think, I'm sure, it's going to be possible to coordinate our actions in Venezuela and to think about how can we deal with the situation in the country. The humanitarian help is independent of the political considerations. By nature, by definition, humanitarian help will be provided whatever political relationship we are going to have with Venezuela. It doesn't matter if they expose our ambassador, it doesn't matter if we declare persona non grata its ambassador. Humanitarian help is above everything. And certainly there is need for humanitarian help in Venezuela. And frankly speaking, I don't know how the situation will evolve before the next regional and local elections. But these elections can bring a new opportunity to look for an agreement between government and opposition. It has not been possible in the legislative elections. Maybe it could be for the next ones. We'll do our best in order to help.
Thank you very much. David Carretta, Radio Radicale. Two questions, if I may. The first one was about Hong Kong, because you announced that you would have taken the next steps or measure already discussed, but we don't see anything on that. And the second question on Russia. The five principles that are guiding the European Union are 5 years old, but a lot has changed after 5 years. And you are saying that they are still valid. How is it's possible? I mean, why don't you change this approach that hasn't had any result? Thank you very much.
Bueno, son válidos porque son muy generales.
Yes, it's valid because it's very general. I mean, clearly, the 5 principles were valid 5 years ago, and they're still valid because we have the same needs to increase the resilience of the EU vis-à-vis Russia, the same need that we had 5 years ago. If we have the same need to be in touch with Russian civil society or to maintain relations with countries further to the east. I mean, all of those needs are still there. It's still necessary to comply with the Minsk agreements, or are we leaving those, letting those fall by the wayside? It's still necessary to have relations with Russia. They're indispensable, for example, in the area of energy or climate change. So what the 5 principles are saying is general and timeless, precisely in that sense. Now, implementation and how we apply those principles is something else, and that will depend on circumstances largely. But the 5 principles, I would say, are timeless and general, and therefore not superseded. The Minsk Agreement, well, perhaps if we'd achieved all those objectives, we could get rid of that, but it's not the case. Now, Hong Kong was not on the agenda today. On your other question, we approved a package of sanctions as an A point, which had been dealt with elsewhere, and we, in fact, didn't have a plan to talk about China either, but the news reached us during the meeting on the Chinese sanctions against EU subject, but no decisions were planned in that policy area.
Thank you very much. With this, we conclude our press conference of today. Thank you so much, and apologies to all the journalists who I couldn't take questions, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you, Mr. High Representative, and thank you to everyone. Have a nice evening. Bye.